This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. It is officially summertime, not because it's warm outside, but because this is the time of the year where the NBA just loves spending money. This is the money time of the year. Money is flying all over the place, and they don't disappoint. I tell you this right now. If you're an NBA player, this is Christmas for you. Forget December and TV games. This is the time of the year where you should basically have a Christmas tree hanging out in your living room if you're an NBA player, because it is money it's WWE, Shaw.
Money in the bank.
Money in the bank.
Shout out to our GI guys for that, for real.
I mean, we need to bring them on. You know what I'm saying? Because I feel like this should be a cross mashup of conversation with what is taking place right now with NBA free agency. And you could probably put an F at the end of it. Free agency frenzy, free agency frenetic. It's massively crazy, man. And so, but again, this is the time of the year as well, too, that we are as equally excited because, me, my man, 50 grand, my brother from another mother, my man Shaw and I, we love, kind of digging in and really kind of setting the table with the landscape of what the expectations are going to be for this upcoming NBA season, right? Fresh off of, a great previous season, we're going right into Summer League, but let it not be said that this little 48, 72-hour window of, players, getting scooped up by these teams, it really is an exciting time of the year, man.
It 1000% is a time of the year, exciting time of the year. I think a lot of people look forward to this more than the actual regular season, just the controversy, the conversations that people are potentially moving. But I will say, save one, two major things that we obviously will get discussed. A lot of people are staying home. And we've seen some salary dumps, as a result of that second apron. I think we talked a little bit about that last year as well, too. A trade that we'll glance over here, but John Collins ends up moving into Utah, Atlanta, basically trying to avoid the tax, and they've been kind of quiet ever since. But literally, I think it's been $2 billion worth of contracts have been signed here in the first few days of free agency. That is record setting in a lot of ways. But I think for us as fans, listeners, consumers in the NBA, we need to consistently remember that the salary cap has gone up, hence as the BRI for the NBA with the new collective bargaining agreement. New TV money is also coming in, and therefore the percentage of the cap that players can get is going to raise the salaries. So the percentages haven't changed in terms of what the players can get, but those percentages change in terms of the actual dollar because the overall cap has gone up. So when you see certain guys now making $45 million and you're like, that's a 17 point per game guy, why is that happening? Well, that's the explanation behind it. So a lot of it is timing. It's just timing of when the new money comes in. And I think, but it's bonkers, right? Your eyes just kind of boggle out when you see some of the staggering numbers that have been thrown around here in the first few days.
Yeah. And one of the things that it really intrigued me more than anything, Shaw, is this was a great opportunity for players to really make a sound decision. This is where I feel like there is a pivot that's being made, whether you're a, novice, like just past your rookie season, maybe a couple of years in, or you're long in the tooth veteran, right? And you're probably thinking about, I want to probably get one more deal to secure that bag. I think the NBA has and the NBPA have helped alleviate a little bit of that tension, so to speak, and has made it okay for certain players to run the course that they can with the current team that they're on, affording these extensions. At the same time, too, it is posed an interesting point for some guys who are trying to figure out what's the best path for their long-term success, whether it be contractually or based off of, whether or not they're able to contribute, get more playing time, and be successful so that the next contractual agreement they have, they can somewhat secure the bag. I think it was much, plain as day. I don't want to be here. I'm gone. Some guys, they're like, you know what? I'll ride this thing out. You give me an extension, I will ride this thing out, because they realize that some of these teams, will need the cap relief. Some of them are willing to go ahead and say, let us go through with giving out the extension. And it's just interesting to me, Shaw, because a few years previous, I think it was much more definitive when a player, you can tell they don't want to be there, but they realize that the best option available for them is to probably stay there. And now that the NBA is, with some of these teams are forced themselves into a corner where it's like we have to pull that trigger. Maybe it was easy to pull back on it, but we have to pull that trigger. And so it's made it a little bit of an easier decision-making process for some of these guys.
Well, especially when the money is as lucrative as it is. And I
As it
think we
is,
can
right.
see the writing on the wall for maybe somewhere down the line. It's like, all right, well, I'll take this money now, get an extension, and then maybe I can ask out later on, force my way out of the situation to a better situation. Or like you said, I'm happy to be here for right now, but if you're in flux, well, so will my loyalty to you will also be in flux. And it is, kind of the dichotomy of player movement, player empowerment, whatever you want to call it here. And I'm more or less here from it. I think it's just a matter of certain players, as we've alluded to, abuse, that empowerment as opposed to invoking the empowerment. And I think there is subtle differences. Those conversations we've had and can continue to have as, the situations arise. But overall, a pretty exciting time in NBA free agency here. And now the trade market, which is kind of the lead off situation as you know what it is.
Yeah,
Somebody's time is up.
we know what it is. So we got a great show on tap. Obviously, we'll be discussing a lot of the quote unquote. It's our coveted, free fat tracker, baby. Free agent tracker. There's some obvious movements. There was way too many movements that we're going to sit here and spend all day getting into. I think most of you guys know all of the immediate resources available for you to check out, what most teams are doing. But there were some significant deals that were made that Shaw and I will definitely get into. And obviously, where teams have essentially transformed themselves through the acquisitions made or already through free agency. So a lot of that. And then obviously, we're kicking things off with regards to two specific trade requests that have been made and what that impact is going to lead as we go into the summer and what possible movements that could lead to for the teams respectively and the players respectively. So a lot to get into. As always, be sure to get my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA. Get at me at Game Face Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, so you know where to find us. You could also go to www.thebaselinenba.com to catch this episode and all of our previous episodes. Also recognize as well, too, that we run with the 19 Media Group. So if you see the blue and white logo via our video platforms, recognize that we rocks with the 19 Media Group family. So be sure to go to www.19mediagroup.com to check out our show and the family of great shows that offer great content for your listening pleasure. So, Shaw, let's get right into it, right? So, obviously, the elephant in the room is regarding two specific players who obviously, given the landscape of what has happened right now in not just NBA free agency, but the landscape of the teams organizationally, structurally, have essentially taken different ways to come to the very same conclusion. I no longer want to play for the current team that I'm playing for. And those two players are Damian Lillard and James Harden. James Harden taking a very unique path in doing so by opting in and then saying, move me. That's like, and Damian Lillard, who, we talked about this offline, Shaw. And I don't say this to be disrespectful. Nothing. I have nothing but the utmost respect for Damian Lillard. I think he's an awesome player, awesome dude. I just wasn't in favor for how he handled things over the last few weeks, and his sentiments about where he wants to be and, quote unquote, his loyalty to the organization and to the team and quote unquote, the fan base and all this other kind of stuff. I feel like now after all of that, it's just smoke and mirrors. And I just felt like, you know what, he should have just stepped aside and either called it as it was, just said, you know what, if you're going to go and get this guy, then just move me, right? Just call it out for what it is and be real about it. Because I think that, and I know we're going to get into the business side of it, but I'm just saying the semantics of it, Shaw, is the precedent that you basically sent to a guy like Scoot Henderson is you cool. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? But I can't rocks with you. And this was never about that. This was about what you felt the organization was doing for you and what your pursuit of championship legacy and whatever the case may be. And I feel like those are two separate things. But how you handle that, I think, speaks more volumes to the guys that are in that locker room that probably made some commitments, that wanted to ride with you for as long as possible. And then by you making that decision, you kind of leave them sitting there saying, oh, so now we got to rocks with Scoot. You know what I'm saying? Like we got to rocks with Chauncey. Like to me, just didn't sit well. I understand you do what you got to do. And I know you want to eventually win a chip, but he could have long time ago spoken out on this part of it and made sure that he separated what his personal passions are for this thing and what eventually should take place for the good of the Portland Trailblazers as well, too.
Well, I'm going to start with maybe a little tongue-in-cheek approach here. If I'm Jeremy Grant, I'm like, thanks for waiting the way you waited, because I don't think Grant gets a 5-year, $160 million deal.
He was looking out for his boy.
Yeah, if Dame makes that proclamation 3 days earlier, the Trailblazers probably say, okay, well, we're going to rebuild. We won't agree to this deal. Now it would just be, bad taste, bad practice, obviously with the Lillard trade request now to back out of the Grant deal. But Grant ultimately gets a super bag as a result of trying to keep Dame happy here, literally by a matter of days. I just don't think Grant would have got the same number, at least not from Portland in general. But you're right.
The Trailblazers look kind of foolish, though, because if you really think that is the only way that you're going to, quote unquote, build this team to be competitive, and I'm not taking anything away from Jeremy Grant. I think that he is worthy of a significant deal. I think there were other suitors out there that were probably going to pay. I don't know if they're going to pay the kind of money that Portland paid, Shaw. What I'm saying is there are other teams we know of that could certainly have used the services of Jeremy Grant on their roster and would have paid whatever necessary money, I think, in this window of championship aspirations to probably get him on board if that were the case.
Yeah, I mean, and whatever the shakeout of this now, it looks like he might get to be the man in Portland at least for a year alongside as they develop Scoot Henderson or whatever the case may be. But again, a lot to be discussed as that shakes out. The reporting here is all over the place, and I would say it's majority accurate. But there's some things here I think when it comes to Dame, the way he asked out is probably not the way that you would have hoped it would have gone. I think, as a Blazers fan as well, too, again, whatever it was, 10, 11 wonderful years of dedication. And a lot of people say, yeah, we understand it's time. But I think the timing was a little bit awkward given where Portland was at from a free agency standpoint, and then obviously the NBA draft. So some of these conversations and decisions probably could have been had, like I said, weeks or even a month or so later. But we are where we are right now. And now I think where Cronin and company need to also understand is like, well, how loyal to the end do they need to be with Dame after he's made this trade request? We all know not Bradley Beal. He doesn't have a no trade clause. Portland needs to make the best decision for them. He wants to go to Miami. Great. The Miami package on its face is not enticing and does not set Portland up for success with the requisite need that they have for the caliber of player Damian Lillard is. You cannot trade me back Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, and whatever. And even if it's 3, 4, 5 picks, like that just doesn't get it done.
Not
I'm flabbergasted at kind of maybe in this way, the underreporting of that. So yes, now they're talking third teams may get involved, and San Antonio may have some interest, and this team may have, Brooklyn obviously has some interest. Philadelphia actually wants to get into the conversation of Dame. Obviously the James Harden thing we need to talk about here a little bit later as well too. But I just don't know from a Miami to Portland standpoint that can be the deal without, again, like a third team getting involved to give Portland what they would need to get back for Damian Lillard. I don't care that he's going to be paid $60 million when he's 34, 35, whatever, however years old. Like, he's going to impact that championship window now. So there has to be a requisite return of that. And I'm waiting to see how Portland's going to extrapolate that from the rest of the league.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I don't see a pathway to there being some kind of a straight up deal. I think if you're the Portland Trailblazers, you even entertain that idea, regardless of the loyalty for Damian Lillard, you are essentially setting up for executive suicide, right? Whoever is going to be making those calls, I don't think we'll be making too many more calls, on an executive level in the NBA, if they F this up. And I preface this to people because for a moment, let's just remove the player per se and look at the team in and of itself. Damian Lillard helped bring success to the Portland Trailblazers. But let's not forget, the Portland Trailblazers also, saw some disappointing seasons while they had Damian Lillard, while they had CJ McCollum, while they had Yusuf Nurkic. I mean, as good as they were with the talent, there have only been a couple periods in which that team had yielded the type of success that merits or warrants the idea that if you don't get this right now with this kind of player, I'm not talking this is going to be like what happens with the Pelicans and Anthony Davis, but I do think that it will set the franchise back much further if they don't get this right. And if it means missing on sending him to where he needs to be to do it, Shaw, if you're the Portland Trailblazers, that cannot be your concern at this point, right? Because if you really think about it, Damian Lillard maybe in some respects could have had leverage in having this done a lot sooner than the idea now that you're putting the Portland Trailblazers in this position to say that he can only work with the teams that he favors to want to go to. Like, I just don't think that that is a good situation, no matter how you slice it. At the end of the day, Portland has to think about Portland in this regard. And there's really not that many teams that are going to be available. And it was one of the things that we talked about this offline, Shaw. If you are Damian Lillard, I think you want to get out ahead of the teams that already understood the landscape of what was available to them in NBA free agency. Part of the point what I was talking about with you offline was the fact that it just felt like getting the point guards or getting the hybrid guards was more important and within the first 48 hours of NBA free agency than necessarily worrying about bringing over a big or bringing over a Draymond or bringing over, you know what I'm saying? Like, I felt like most of those guys are going to stay home uniquely or get moved, like trade deals, like how Atlanta moved John Collins and things of that nature. So if you're a team that desperately needs to change the dynamic of how your team is going to be ran from a backcourt position, the guards are the ones who basically went out because they were gone in less than a snapshot, right? So if you're Damian Lillard and you're trying to go somewhere where people desperately want your services in a championship window, you would have needed to get out ahead of where Portland needs to start making that initiative be heard. Rather than waiting, then all of those guys are gone and possible guys that could do sign and trade deals are no longer on the table. And now you're working with Miami or you're working maybe with Philadelphia, and you got to work with this really complex way of putting things together. I'm just saying that to me, this is part of that process that players miss out on at times, or even their agents miss out on times when the players are saying, this is what I want and this is what I'm demanding.
Yeah, and I just think that you alluded to it's just how loyal does Portland want to be here to the end. It was neither one of them wanted to be the first to say goodbye. So Dame finally bites the bullet, says it again. Timing could be better, whatever. But now you're right. The market is different than it was, a week ago. And so that's where I'm left with now. When you're the person who is being left, you have to do what's best for you. And I don't know one way or the other. I don't know that they're going to escape scrutiny. So at the end of the day, again, you don't have to try to oversell this now. Yeah, you want to send Dame to Miami, and that's where he wants to go. But if that's not the best deal, well, then that's on Dame to figure out at some point later on. And you got to just take whatever is available. So I don't know what that is currently. I would assume they're going to do the quintessential no matter what. We're going to want to get them over to the Eastern Conference so they don't have to see them, an extra 2 times a year. That aspect of things always kind of bugged me out, but it is what it is. It's a real thing. It's how GMs and teams think. But what other Eastern Conference teams can get into this conversation, and again, we talked, briefly. I don't think Boston would do it. Obviously, it would cost them Jaylen Brown, but I don't think he's made multiple conversations Dame has that he doesn't want to be there anyway. So does he go there and become a malcontent? Obviously, Philadelphia would love to get in there and swap him out for James Harden, not necessarily with Harden going to Portland. I don't know if Milwaukee would see an opportunity here now. They'd probably have to come up off of Drew Holiday. Does that actually make them better? And what else can you throw into that conversation? I mean, it has to be upper echelon teams at the end of the day,
Right.
and it's not going to be the middle of the proverbial pack in the East. Whereas, I think Miami now sits in the situation where like we talked, I don't see how, if I'm Portland, I'm not at least getting Bam Adebayo back. And that doesn't make Miami championship level if it's just Dame and Jimmy Butler. So the path is a little bit muddied, and I feel fairly confident that this is going to take a week or so to probably hash out, especially with all the contracts, the players that are ultimately going to need to get involved, third and maybe even fourth teams, to give Portland a package that is requisite. The compensation that they need for a star of Damian Lillard's caliber.
Yeah, totally. You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA as we're getting right into some of the news and notes that are happening in the association, specifically trade requests with Dame Lillard. And then now we're going to transition ourselves over to James Harden. So James Harden takes a unique pathway, Shaw, to taking his exodus. He's like, I want my money and then I want you to move me. And listen, man, if you had asked me, what was it, 2011 was when he went to the NBA Finals when he was playing with the Oklahoma City Thunder. If you had asked me over the last 12 years, which pro athlete would have the most unique story to tell or would have the most unique storylines through the course of their career, I would have never said it was James Harden. He's in the beginning, he never came across as somebody to me that would command such attention. And we don't need to get into the social media aspects of things. It's got nothing to do with that. I've just never seen a player who is uniquely upended the way that we look at how franchises value, obviously, quality players of this kind of ilk of James Harden, and how players like James Harden evolve and are able to sort of turn the rules of engagement when it comes to negotiating deals and trades and moves and things of that nature on its face, on its head. There is always a unique scenario that has to be played out when James Harden is involved. And this one is no different.
Bro, I mean, how many times are we going to have this song and dance now? Right.
But I honestly think, and I'm saying this to all of the great universities that are out there that have sports management programs and NBA contractual negotiation, classes. And so you need to stoke in the whole James Harden timeline and lay out a course in and of itself. James Harden is a course in and of itself. You know what I'm saying? Certificates should be handed out when we're talking about this dude.
Yeah, you get the extra credit if you go to the strip clubs, I guess,
Oh
as
my
well.
God.
So I don't know, man. Beard he's on one, and just continually not finding the right situations for himself. Now a third team in a row. Basically, he's becoming a 1-year mercenary, I think, in a lot of ways, and just like, hey, no,
Not a good one at that, though, man. Not
yeah,
a good one at that. I have more confidence in Kevin Durant being a merc than I do James Harden.
Yeah. So we'll see what the path lends to. So he was the hot trade commodity until Dame asked out, and now he gets kind of bumped down, the pecking order here because obviously Lillard has more value in today's NBA. Although Harden still led the league in assists last year. His scoring is down, roughly almost 10 points per game, from where he was kind of at his almost superpowers. But his assists are up roughly 2-3 assists a game. And he's now becoming a playmaker, and he can still be a 20 and 10 guy. He seems like he's going to miss games, so you're going to get roughly 60 to 65 games out of him, a year. But then it's always the questions about the playoff performances and then what level of interest does he show there now. It seems pretty clear that the Clippers are the potential landing spot that maybe he even wants to go to and would have some interest. Ironically, before Lillard officially asked out, Miami was like, well, we'll see what's going on over here as well too, because they desperately want to address that situation. And right now it seems like those are only two teams that have legitimate and realistic interest, I think, in him. I just don't think him going to Portland in a swap right now is currently on the table, but that's as we record here on a weekend afternoon before the GMs and their bright minds kind of get to going. I'm struggling to find another spot for him that makes a whole lot of sense, but more or less, as you alluded to, it truly is the James Harden experience, and you got to be willing to sign yourself up for that. And I think the Clippers, given their situation now with the PG and Kawhi and just how fragile those guys are in terms of being on the court on a regular basis, just what makes it better if you bring Harden in here? Because Harden, I guess Harden will accept the fact that you're not playing because you're legitimately hurt. But you saw how it went with him and Kyrie when Kyrie just wasn't around. And does he feel some type of way that these guys or Kawhi is going to manage Kawhi way? He's going to play when he wants to. And those are all things we don't know I don't know if I know enough about what's in James Harden's head about how he wants to, kind of masterclass his performances, for whatever's left of his career here, obviously in championship level situations.
For a guy who led the league in NBA assists, I've never seen someone play with the level of selfishness that he does. Like it and it's listen, there's nothing wrong with that if you're trying to seek individual greatness.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. There are just some players who know how to balance it so that it does elevate and make teams better. And somewhere along the lines within that, man, you have to show up when it matters the most. And I think that's always been the knock with James Harden. His numbers are gonna go down. Is probably one of the most prolifically offensively gifted players of our generation, especially from the southpaw style. But there hasn't been anything signature done in with maybe exception of that 45-point performance that he did against the Celtics, last season. Outside of that, there's never been a signature moment for him that really elevates him on a level that says, we should be having those conversations, even about the great scores of the game of basketball and where it matters most, taking their team to the next level or taking their team to the next thing. And it's not even about doing it, taking them to an NBA finals. It's really just the level of consistency of it happening. Right. So there was something I wanted to ask you about this, Shaw. If the Clippers are so interested in getting him, didn't they re-up Westbrook?
Yeah, Westbrook signed 2 years, $8.5 million, I think it was. So yeah, Russ would have to potentially come off the bench. He's insurance, and at the end of the day, if you don't get Harden, like as you were alluding to, do you just let players go? And if Russ is willing to take $8 million, total over 2 years, I think that's pretty bargain basement. So for the Clippers, it's like, all right, cool. If we strike out for whatever reason, then we still have somebody we know we can rely on at a decent salary. But I'm really interested to see now who else kind of gets into the conversation. There's been all kinds of wild stuff, man. So you got to be careful when you're on NBA Twitter for whatever's left of it. Thanks Elon Musk. The Phoenix Suns, they were allegedly going to kick the tires on Kyrie. They may try to kick the tires on Harden. I'm like, I don't how Sway, how would you even make that happen? So again, you got to be careful about what you read and consume here right now. But it seems like right now it's Clippers or bust. I can't imagine that he and Daryl Morey have fallen out the way that they have, but it is what it is. And James Harden will be playing somewhere else right now, this upcoming season. We just don't know exactly where that will be in terms of the suitors outside of the Clippers right now.
I often said I had said this, numerous times, Shaw, that like something had to give with the dynamic of that team for Philadelphia. And I don't know, to your point, if whether or not this is all impacted by the impasse that Harden and Morey may have. I do feel like there was always going to need to be a third element in making that team better. And it wasn't going to be Tyrese Maxey, not because we don't think Tyrese Maxey is a great player, but because the dynamic of Harden and Maxey just do not work. And I don't care what coach you have in place. You could put Nick Nurse, you could put Popovich, you could put whoever you want. The way Harden plays is counterintuitive to Tyrese Maxey. So the only other element that could have possibly worked with the way that James Harden plays that it could probably have benefited would have been Tobias Harris. And we have already seen how malcontent Tobias Harris is. This to me is this is more on Morey, that he really should have done something by the trade deadline moving Tobias Harris. But he believed in him and they rode this thing out as long as they are. Now, because of this, it only makes sense that Harden becomes the odd man out in this, because if you still buy into Maxey and Harris, that to me seems a little more viable. And I think you can get somebody comparable, maybe not to the level of a James Harden, because I think Maxey should step in and be that Harden for that Philadelphia 76ers team next to Embiid. But something's got to be done where you're really gauging to see whether or not you can continue to play with this trifecta of Maxey, Embiid, and Harris.
Well, that's where I'll circle you back to the Dame conversation, because I think that's where the trade is to be made. I think it's between Philadelphia, LA, and Portland.
Right.
Some conversation where Dame ends up in Philly, Harden ends up on the Clippers, Maxi and compensation, so forth and so forth, ends up in Portland. I think that is the most viable and situation. I think, that can be constructed to some degree for the Blazers specifically, since they would hold the proverbial cards here, of the highest talent that needs to be moved, and so they would have to be compensated, I think, the strongest. But Maxi is somebody that I think they can say, yeah, let's hitch our wagon to that. Then you throw in what other compensation and players kind of there too, and then that kind of gets you somewhere. But that's not where we're at least not today, in terms of like the negotiation style. And as we're talking, I'm again, I really want to figure out, all right, where else can Harden go? And the more places you look at, like, they just wouldn't take him. There's just no reason for him. Like Toronto, yeah, they just lost Fred VanVleet, but they're not going to get involved in that. And would they even want to help interdivision, rival in some capacity, to facilitate some sort of trade? The Pelicans, I mean, would you get off with CJ and then try to pair him alongside Zion if and when that guy ever returns back to the floor? Like, I don't know. Like I said, there's, it's really kind of grasping at straws here right now too. But I think Harden obviously will be in the league next year. But I don't know. It's just not this quick and easy fit. He's not going back to OKC, although that would be a nice story for some people. The Rockets obviously shunned him because they wanted VanVleet. So there's just not a clear path for James at this current status, despite how talented he still is.
So we'll have to keep our eyes peeled and see what we'll make of both of these guys, as we go through the course of the summer. But it'll be interesting. I mean, obviously with Lillard, there's no question you can't bring him back to Portland. Got to move him. And listen, if you're Philly, listen, he opted in, he did, and he can't now not say I don't want to play. So,
wow.
I think Philly in some respects has already dealt with more than enough drama that if they said, listen, until we get what we want, your ass is just going to have to be on the court and you're going to have to play with Embiid and those dudes.
Well, there's two things to that, and I'll say this. One, we've seen how Harden can be when he's uncomfortable and he doesn't want to be a place. He can make it kind of chaotic in your locker room. Two, we've also seen Daryl Morey handle the Ben Simmons situation, was like, yeah, I'm not going to just give away something. We're going to figure out what it is we need to do. Right. Ironically, now he's back in that situation with the guy he got for Ben Simmons. But I think it's going to be a kind of like, like we always talk about the Diddy meme, and hey, you looking at me, I'm looking at you. Who's going to kind of flinch first? And I think Morey is probably is better at ease with being uncomfortable till they can find a deal that makes sense. So if they're not able to get something done, maybe they put Harden away from the team. Maybe they find him and do all those other things too that they did to Ben Simmons. I don't know. I just can't imagine they'd allow it to get that ugly. But I'd actually place my bets on Morey being more comfortable in that situation than Harden would ultimately.
Oh, Morey masters uncomfortability.
Yeah.
He masters it. They ought to have a cushion named after him. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we're going to get into some more of the information that's happening or things that have been flowing through NBA free agency through our free agency tracker. Don't want to miss out on that. Hey, are you looking for the ultimate destination for NBA gear? Look no further than the NBA store. With a huge selection of authentic and high-quality products, including jerseys, hats, and accessories, the NBA store has everything you need to show off your team pride. Plus, with exclusive and limited edition items, you can make your collection truly one of a kind. And with an online presence, you can shop from anywhere in the world. Don't miss out on the latest trends and experiences. Visit the NBA store today by clicking our affiliate link. If you're listening to us on your favorite audio platform, be sure to check the link in the description of the show. The Baseline is working in affiliation with the NBA store /Fanatics and will be compensated for your patronage by utilizing our link. And we thank you for your support. Be sure to go to nbastore.vwz6.net/baseline. Coming up, free agency tracker, Callie, Warren Shaw, The Baseline.
Time to break it down.
Time now for the breakdown. Callie, Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. And this segment of The Baseline is brought to you by Blue View Footwear. Are you ready to step up your style without compromising the planet? Introducing the exciting partnership between Blue View Footwear and 19 Media Group Network. Just visit bit.ly/BlueView19 to start your sustainable style journey. Our friends over at Blue View Footwear are renowned for introducing the world's first fully biodegradable sneaker. By using plant-based plastics, they are leading a revolution in cleaner materials and manufacturing. They have sleek and contemporary styles that cater to a wide range of tastes. Blue View Footwear believes that fashion and sustainability can coexist harmoniously. Explore their incredible collection of eco-friendly footwear by visiting bit.ly/BlueView19. And if you let us know that you've made a purchase, we'll shout you out on our next show. Again, just visit bit.ly/BlueView19 today, and you'll see the ultimate collaboration of fashion, sustainability, and media excellence. And Shaw, as we start embarking ourselves, in regards to the NBA free agency, again, we talked about it earlier before, close to $2 billion in deals done within the first 48 hours of NBA free agency opening up. And a couple of teams obviously have transformed, right? Have completely will completely look different come tip off for the 2023-24 NBA season. Specifically, teams like the Rockets, Lakers, and Suns will have a completely different dynamic, a different look to them outside of just their head coach. The personnel as well too, Shaw, can really speak volumes about whether or not things can either be turned around or things can be taken up a level when you look at both of these teams who obviously have taken advantage of the free agency wave this season.
Yeah, for the most part, if you're listening and watching all the free agency conversation, I think by and large, everybody says the Lakers have won free agency by virtue of the deals that make the most amount of sense for their teams, retaining guys who they needed to retain, and then filling in spots, I think, with capable players, high level talent that makes sense and seem to fit the roster. So Reeves, Hachimura, and D'Angelo Russell, while Russell was maybe the only question mark there, all those guys come back as we would have expected, going into the offseason. But really surprised by their ability to get Cam Reddish on a veteran minimum deal. And, Rich Paul doing Rich Paul things there. I think a lot of teams, I think he probably gave the Lakers that discount. I don't think Reddish was going to sign for a veteran minimum on other rosters, but that's a super signing. At least that you just take the flyer. And if he finally figures it out, then great. I understand he's been on 3 teams, right? Atlanta, New York, and Portland, and they've all kind of passed on him. But I think that's just it's such a smart signing. Then getting Gabe Vincent to kind of come over from the Miami Heat. Jackson Hayes leaves New Orleans, and they also get Taurean Prince, who Minnesota kind of inexplicably let go as well too. I mean, those are boss moves, I think, for the Lakers and a team that, while hopefully they'll have the whole season out to adjust and to gel together. But I think it really makes sense. But again, a lot of changes in LA, and we had LeBron having the conversation. Well, we don't know who's going to be here. Well, now we know who's there. I think Lakers are pretty good to go here. I agree that they've probably had the most impactful and best overall free agency start to the summer based on what they needed and who the players that they were able to get into the fold.
I'll say that I'll say that they have had the most impactful. I'm not going to go on a limb and say that they've won free agency. While I like a good number of the signings, I'm still a little foggy on the D'Angelo Russell play, only because I don't think that I don't think he's the point guard that the Lakers really need to have with this version of LeBron James and this version of Anthony Davis. Maybe that's just me and short-sighted vision, and there wasn't enough time for us to be able to properly assess if whether that is or isn't the case. It'll be interesting to see what version of D'Angelo Russell shows up this upcoming season, and how he incorporates himself with the rest of the guys. I think it was uber important that they kept Austin Reeves. I agree with you in them getting Cam Reddish and Taurean Prince at the deals that they've got them at. Awesome. Gabe Vincent, solid role, backup guy, and really at the price, I think, that they got. He's a bulldog, a pest like Dennis Schroeder, minus all of the dramatics. Jackson Hayes, decent, solid. The one thing that does not stand out, and I'm sure this will probably be something that they'll address later on the road, is, who do you have backing up Anthony Davis? Who do you have that is really going to be the muscle in the middle for the Lakers? And the fact that I don't think that they had an opportunity to address that or figure out a way to steal somebody from there to address that part of it, I think to me still stands out. I don't think they still have enough to knock off, the Nuggets, who, yes, they've lost a couple of, important pieces, but I still think that as far as being among the bigger teams, if you're the Lakers and you're saying this is who we got to go through, whether or not this roster is still going to be good enough to beat like a team like the Nuggets. But let me put it like this. There's no question for people to not acknowledge that this team will definitely be dangerous. They will definitely be more athletic. The scoring to me is still of a question mark. And again, their front court presence.
Well, they'll impart Gabriel, and obviously the signing of Hayes. I agree in terms of saying like they're not girthy guys. They're more kind of like energy guys, and they're skilled basketball players. But if you're looking to go against the Jokic's of the world, well, there's only one of that. But at the end of the day, like that is probably where they're going to need some more help physically. But I think the majority of the roster more or less makes sense here now. Especially when you're talking about, guards and wings. And yeah, can they get a little bit more beef? Not really sure what they're going to do with the Mo Bamba situation. By the time this comes out, he could be re-signed there, whoever. But either way, I think they're heading in the right direction in general.
Oh, yeah, no question, especially with the amount of money. And again, the jury's still out on D'Angelo. I don't want people to get this twisted because I love D'Angelo Russell. I've always been a fan of him. He obviously his maturity has compromised his ability to be as great a player as I expected him to be. But I've seen his game has become so much more half court oriented. And I do feel like if you're the Lakers, you have to have a balance. And part of that balance is you've got youth in Reeves and Hachimura, and still even with LeBron James at his age and Anthony Davis, these guys could be solid guys in which the Lakers could be a good open transitional type basketball team. But that's not how they're trying to play, which I don't think favors them in that kind of regard. So, and having a guard like that who's not going to force them to play that like that when it's necessary, I think is where it becomes a question. Maybe they get that from Gabe Vincent and Darvin Ham.
And I think that's where it goes. Like there's a chance Vincent actually starts a good portion of games and Russell becomes kind of the microwave offensive guy.
We'll see.
Off the bench.
We'll
there's
see.
a chance.
You're doing okay. All right, y'all. Let's transition to the Houston Rockets real quick. New backcourt alert. Dylan Brooks and Fred VanVleet. I don't even think this is like the odd couple. I don't even think if you told me we were pairing guards, based off of how free agency was gonna, land for teams. I did not see this coming, especially since they were guard heavy to begin with anyway, right? So now you go VanVleet and you go Dylan Brooks. I don't know how they put this together. That's just kind of like what do you do that when you pull that wheel on Price is Right? It's just I don't get it, man. You're gonna have to explain this one to me.
Yeah, well, the Rockets roster it's a little perplexing for me as well too, given the fact that they the re-signed Kevin Porter Jr. And I'm not saying you don't get VanVleet because you have KPJ. I'm not saying that at all. But I think you're going to have somebody. It's going to probably be a little bit of a malcontent there as well too. Now with that, with that coming in, and you drafted a Man Thompson. Not saying that you don't draft a Man Thompson, but so where all these guys play now in Udoka's system should be really interesting. I think Brooks and Jalen Green will be the 2 and 3. They'll be the wing. VanVleet will start. Kevin Porter Jr. now is going to be regulated to the bench, coming off in that role along with the Man Thompson, as the aforementioned. You still have Jabari Smith. You still have Şengün there as well too, and again a new coach who's going to implement some new strategies and all of a sudden hopefully a culture of potential winning here as well too. I love what they did in maybe getting Jock Landale. The Suns decided to move off of him for whatever reason. They get in another adult in the room in Jeff Green to kind of help bring that. And if you remember Austin, Austin Rivers was talking about playing the Houston Rockets and just saying like, hey, they're just a bunch of kids out there just running like BS. They have no adults. I think, with Udoka coming in there and also now Jeff Green, that allows them to have some semblance of veteran leadership within that space. How good they'll be, that very much remains to be seen because it's going to take some time to kind of gel this roster. But the main thing too is like the role definement, because they have some guys who do some similar things. And I am ultimately worried about Kevin Porter Jr. maybe not acquiescing, I think, immediately to what might be a minimized role here now, obviously with Fred VanVleet coming in to be the starting point guard.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Kenyon Martin Jr. got scooped up by another team, right?
Yeah, they moved off of
Those-
him,
they tra-
Chris Martin,
those
like
into the
all
Clippers.
those kind of like, you know what I mean, like energy guys that were wings on their roster. They've decided that, you know what, we're gonna go with this iteration of players here now. So some of those Rockets that you kind of know and love for the last 2 years are now have moved on.
Yeah, probably of all of them, the Kenyon Martin Jr. play, I think I don't know if I'm on board with. I get what the Rockets are looking to try and do, and listen, I think, and maybe Ime Udoka has probably had a voice in this because I think that he had a voice in the way that the Boston Celtics elevated themselves. It starts with the guard play, it really does, and the fact that Ime Udoka was able to get Marcus Smart to be a better guard. He even had Peyton Pritchard play better, in a guard position, for what the Celtics did. I think he's going to have that same type of influence with the roster here, but I think part of it is having some kind of a veteran presence there. It'll be interesting to see what takes place here, Shaw. All I know is that they must really believe in Thompson's um potential, right? Like they really must believe in his upside because I don't know what else this team is going to look like. Even with having Van Fleet, um, I'm not so much as worried about Dylan Brooks. I think that he's going to be who he is, um, probably even on steroids because Ime Udoka was a bulldog as well too. So I'm sure he's going to have an influence on Brooks. And while Brooks is a solid defender, he took a step back last year. He just did flat out. He did not show up in many games, and his mouth became more of his calling card than really his game. So I think Udoka sets him back. And this team I think will improve defensively. But it'll be interesting to see because I really don't know what this team is going to look like, and this is going to feel like a reclamation project for Udoka, which I'm not sure. I'm sure he's like up for the challenge. But I don't know. Really strange. Really, really strange altogether.
Yeah, we'll see. No, but again, Houston will be much transformed, very different. We just don't know, again, as you alluded to, how good they'll be. I think off rip, but give that team some time to gel, get the new parts, kind of underway. They've made these moves relatively quickly in the beginning part of the free agency process, so Udoka will have time to implement a system, kind of going into training camp and throughout the season, and we'll see where it all lands.
All right. The other team, Shaw, that obviously has been impacted by the moves that they've made and also with what they're doing in free agency, the Phoenix Suns. Um, Listen, as a quote unquote super team or a team with potential with multiple superstars on the roster, it's hard to imagine or hard to not look at them and say, they're going to obviously be a top echelon team if their stars stay healthy. The question is do they have enough depth to be able to facilitate not running these players into the ground and still being able to successfully win enough games that they become a higher seed and don't become a calamity of what typically happens when you top heavy your roster and have nothing from a depth perspective to be able to compete when those guys come off the floor. So, again, this is textbook situation here about rolling the dice and going all in on this idea. And obviously the Phoenix Suns, they're going to be the test case yet again. Can another team, like this are they built to win a championship?
Well, I mean, again, top heavy as hell. They need to fill out the rest of the roster. So, guys like Metu, Okogie, they re-sign Watanabe, they bring back from Brooklyn, KD guy, Bates Job, Drew Eubanks from Portland, nice player. I like him a lot. Damian Lee. They do a mix of retaining a couple guys and then bringing in some, kind of role players. We know this team is going to be super top heavy. Right now, the bench there's not a bench leader. So, but I guess you don't need one if you have, the starting lineup that you have, where at least one of those four guys will always be on the floor. to kind of take some of the brunt of the offensive load specifically. So there might be some opportunities. Frank Vogel will have to figure this out. Does he allow Ayton to eat a little bit more in different lineups now with maybe some of these other guys who are going to come in here off the bench, and then Ayton can get featured because he's not going to get the touches, obviously, when KD, Book, and Beal are out there. So I think that's something that they can do to diversify what how they run their offense, and maybe bring Ayton back into a happier space while he's in Phoenix.
Yeah, I agree with you and that a particular approach. One thing I will say, not that I disagree with what you were saying, but like my perspective is that when situations like this occur, where you make big trades or you make significant moves in bringing in players like this, and you wind up losing some of those role players or some of those key guys like Jock Landale and such, I do think that it impacts the team because those guys ran up significant playing minutes last year with the roster that they had. And even if your intent is that you're trying to build up the roster, make it better, make it competitive, losing those guys, I think, has an impact, right? Like those minutes of and trust, typically, it's hard to just find people to replace. And I think the good thing maybe is that you have a coach like Frank Vogel who's been able to, I guess, in a way, utilize other guys, fill other guys in ways that they can make up for what could potentially be lost when those type of role players disappear and go elsewhere and stuff like that. That could be their saving grace, so to speak. But very rarely do I see teams still become as successful, if nothing else, because when you start losing key role guys that were soaking up enough minutes from last season, and you don't really fill that in properly, or you don't position the next guy up to step up to be able to fill those minutes in properly, you're putting the onus, you're putting the burden again back on those star players to take the minutes that you were hoping not to impose upon them, through the course of a regular season and even during playoff runs.
Yeah. Well, I'll close with this on Phoenix again. There's still the potential. Maybe they trade Ayton for more depth. That was the plan that we thought they would go into. It seems like they're going to keep him now, but things could obviously change before we get to training camp. But I think Phoenix is just, they filled out the roster, and that's what they ultimately needed to do. They have bodies, so they're not, just running around with 5 guys out there and just nobody else. So, I think they did a decent job to start the free agency period, and see if they make some more changes here throughout the course of the summer.
All right, you're tuned to the Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we'll continue our conversations with all of the happenings through free agency with our free agency tracker, so you don't want to miss out here on the Baseline. We are back, Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast, and we continue our conversation, the free agency tracker, basically with all of the happenings going on. Shaw, you said this earlier before, and I think you're so right, man. This was about the extensions, man. Big money energy, because it's big money extensions being handed out. Desmond Bane, LaMelo Ball, Tyrese Haliburton, Domantas Sabonis, all of those guys received nice, lucrative extension deals to stay with the teams that they are currently on. And again, I think it speaks to the idea that this opened up a window for these guys to say, hey, I'm gonna stay at home. I think there's enough opportunity and time down the road for me to find another market, for me to get another bag. But if you're gonna give me this money up front, taking it.
Yeah, over $200 million for all of those guys. The Sabonis one was the most interesting. Sacramento rearranged their cap space in order to be able to basically give them a raise here now immediately, which is something that you don't often see teams do. So them helping Sabonis out, and the fact that he didn't sign the extension before the new bargaining agreement, I think he's making an extra like $50 to $60 million as a result of it. Timing really is everything. So the beginning of our show, we discussed, hey, understanding it's percentages of the cap that these guys are able to hold. So as the cap goes up, the percentage allows the total number, the base number, to go up. And that's where Bane, Ball, Halliburton, and Sabonis specifically are able to really capitalize. So I'm not counting their pockets. I'm just understanding that it's a lot of money. It's hard for some of the fans out there to swallow the fact that, hey, this is this is where we're at now in today's NBA. The Jaylen Brown extension, should come at some point this summer as well too, and that might be roughly $290 to $300 million. So be prepared.
Yeah, I mean, we do. So we could throw that in there and then really like make the pot look like half a bill, right? I mean, we're just throwing out those numbers, we're throwing them out. Listen, kudos to these guys, all of them in their own way, shape, or form. Put themselves in the best position possible to force the organizations to recognize, these are pillar guys, right? Like these are guys that, it's not building around per se that we're talking about, but I'm just saying that like it's hard to imagine them playing for other teams given what they contributed to the teams this past season. And with the exception of LaMelo Ball because of his injuries, a lot of that is more risk taking, but Tyrese Haliburton, Desmond Bane, and Domantas Sabonis without question prove their worth and obviously stabilize, if not elevated, their teams respectively to be in the position of us having those conversations about how dangerous and competitive they're going to be for this upcoming NBA season.
Yeah, well said, brother. Well said.
All right.
I can't wait.
So you were really impressed by a couple of bargain deals that were done. You talked about it a little bit earlier before about the Pelinka, stealth-like tactics in pulling Cam Reddish onto the roster for, a very Laker-friendly deal. And Seth Curry making his way back to the Dallas Mavericks. This is like his third time going over there. I just genuinely think he likes like Dallas. You know what I'm saying? But the Dallas Mavericks wind up either that or he just really thinks that he's like, he's really not Steph Curry's brother. He's like the long-lost brother to Kyrie Irving. But Seth Curry going back to Dallas, it's a favorable deal for the Dallas Mavericks. For a guy like Seth Curry, who I could clearly see being in other places for a lot more money to give to contribute the way that he has contributed for the teams that he's played for the last few seasons. Obviously, this is more about comfort and how he sees himself and where he fits, and he feels comfortable, again, playing back underneath the helm of Jason Kidd.
Yeah, I mean, I got too much on this again. 2 years, 4.5 million or something to that degree. For a shooter in today's market, that's pretty.
Hey, 4.5 million goes a long way in Dallas than it does in Brooklyn.
Yeah, well, it's savvy on Dallas's part. You can say what you want about the Kyrie extension. Everything they did with Kyrie, they've kind of done the exact opposite in terms of getting a bargain, I think, in Seth Curry for that number. So he goes back to Dallas, as you allude to, in a situation that he's very familiar with, and should provide some great shooting. And again, the Reddish deal, I think, was really good. We talked a little bit about even Jeff Green, him moving on. We didn't mention, or I forgot to, you put in the notes there too. Shouts to Bruce Brown getting an ultimate big payday. 2-year deal, $45 million, team option on year 2. But to get $20 million from what he was getting this past year to go to Indiana, I think is really, 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 really special for him and a player that hopefully he'll be able to live up to that contract financially, and at least in Indiana's eyes. So a lot of moving parts here in free agency.
One thing I wanted to say, Shaw, and I'm glad you brought up the deal with Bruce Brown. Bruce Brown to me is an outlier. He's kind of like a unicorn right now in the highlight of this, because I'm sure he probably would have loved to have been given something like of a 4-year, maybe if that was what it was on his mind, or maybe he just really is comfortable with the idea that he has no problem playing for 1 or 2 years, you know what I'm saying? And then figuring out where his next play is, like in this day and age right now, everybody's all about securing the bag and securing, what's the word? Basically making sure that they don't have to upend and move, right? That or get moved. I see more guys who tend to say that I'm going to take on a 1-year, 2-year deal that are on the back end of their careers, because that's what they know that they're only going to be good for some of these organizations and teams based off of how their teams are structured. But a guy like Bruce Brown, I think, could have gotten a 4-year deal. You know what I'm saying? And maybe that's just not what he was looking for. Maybe he's looking at, hey, I see the next 2-year window of my time. You want to front load me that money? Then don't worry about me with the years on the deal. I want to know that you're going to compensate me well for what I bring to the table, especially fresh off of winning the championship.
Championship glow. And, I'm happy for him. Indiana was on the path to success for the majority part of last season. They just kind of fell off the map. Halliburton had some injuries, et cetera, et cetera. But we'll see how Bruce Brown goes into that situation and helps that roster who've made other couple of the moves too. Obviously, getting Obi Toppin, they moved Chris Duarte away. So, Indiana is going to be a team to watch this upcoming season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, y'all. A couple of other teams. The Cleveland Cavaliers, Memphis Grizzlies. They obviously are looking to address certain needs. Where do you think free agency is going to be for those two teams? Right, like I know that they've made a couple of signings, and they look like they're decent. I don't know if they're tilting the scale any much. And I don't know if whether or not it's pushing them up or it's leaving them stagnant or it's actually stepping them down.
Yeah. Well, for me with Cleveland, I think that we all know they needed shooting. So they get that in George Niang. They get Max Strus from Miami in a 3-team deal. Seems to make sense. They bring back Karis LeVert, so they don't have to lose, some of their bench potency. And then if Donovan Mitchell is out for any stretch of the games, LeVert can obviously plug in there as well too. To me, getting Strus and Niang specifically addressed shooting. And while Strus is not the knockdown guy that a lot of people would like to make him out to be, I think he can obviously be better than he was this past year in Miami, with some different table setters here now too. And Darius Garland, I think, is obviously a really, really good point guard in our league. So to me, Cleveland, they addressed the need that they had, especially when it came to the shooting aspect of what they were doing. And in Memphis, I think it's about maturity. So they've already got, Marcus Smart in the trade market, but adding Derrick Rose, I thought was a masterstroke for them as well too. And he has more to give. So I think he'll be able to play some pretty significant minutes for them going into it. So that to me is where I want to give, Memphis their flowers. They're making the best of a bad situation. Obviously signing Bane, who we talked about a little while ago as well too. But in the absence of Ja, you have two pro level guys, two guys who know what it means to win and to do it at high levels. Rose in it as an MVP, Marcus Smart as a guy who's been on one organization for 9 years, been to an NBA finals and multiple Eastern Conference finals. I think Memphis is heading in the right direction.
All right, Shaw. And then, we look at the Raptors and the Hawks, two teams, obviously they're question marks, and the free agency, I don't know if whether or not was going to help answer but it may have probably given us a little bit of insight on the direction. And I think you're like, dude, what's the plan with those guys, right? So there's more question marks than there are any exclamation points about where these teams are trying to go.
Yeah, Toronto. I mean, you lose Van Vliet, fine, but then like almost a desperation move to bring in Dennis Schroeder. All right, let's see how it goes. I mean, I guess you could do worse, but I don't, and they're not. I guess they're not going to be done. A lot of hope that Scotty Barnes can obviously facilitate offense for them too. So I'm not worried about it from that aspect. But Schroeder is always an interesting fit wherever he ultimately goes. But they can get the playmaking from Barnes, and I think Siakam to a lesser degree. They re-signed Jakob Poeltl 4 years, 80. So Toronto, I think, is just going to be obviously with a new coach as well too. Just kind of in the middle. But not making the splash that they obviously hope that they would have. And Atlanta, as we talked about earlier, moving off of John Collins, haven't really done anything else, since that. They took a couple of draft picks from Houston, as Houston was trying to clear space to get Dylan Brooks and company in there too. So I think they get Ty Washington, and I'm forgetting the other young man's name here now as well too. So maybe they're looking to develop that, but Atlanta has been pretty subpar, I think, when it comes to the free agency movements here in the beginning parts of the summer.
Yeah, I'm wondering where this team is going to be, where this team is truly going to be at, because it's almost like they're in no man's land. So it'll be interesting to see what. I'm losing my mind with Quinn Snyder. It'll be interesting to see what Quinn Snyder does with the roster that the Hawks are going to present to him, because I feel like they're just stuck in a specific space where they're not going to get any better. I don't know if they're going to get any worse. I don't think losing John Collins really impacts them that much in the grand scheme of things when it comes to this team. But it'll be interesting to see, what comes of how this team responds with the way that the Eastern Conference is now being set up and structured, the rosters that are already in play because of the activities that the other teams have been doing to your point, y'all, counter to what the Atlanta Hawks have shown us so far in the offseason. Wow, man. Way too much going on, bro. Way too much. And you're going to Vegas. I'm just saying, just way too much going on, man.
I will be in Vegas. Shout out to 19 Media Group. We'll have some credentials out there for this summer, so hopefully you'll be able to catch the feeds. the Baseline feed, my personal feed, Shaw Sports NBA, and then obviously 19 Media Group as well too. I try to head out there, definitely will be going to the Wembanyama versus Brendan Miller matchup. Check out Scoot Henderson as well too.
15 minutes of glory.
Yeah, however many minutes there are. Chet Holmgren is supposed to play for OKC.
It's 5 minutes it's 5 minutes, you know what I'm saying, real time, 15 minutes. You know what I'm saying?
But then and catch up with some of our media colleagues as well too. So yeah, definitely stay tuned to the feeds. We'll be out there at Summer League and enjoying all that Vegas has to offer, in all its glory.
All right. If you see a little Scrappy out there, you know what I'm saying?
Listen, if you're a fan or listener, listen, check it. Summer League has turned into mini All-Star. The amount of events that are going on, produced even by the NBA itself, has like doubled or tripled from years past. So it is truly an event. It's going to cost you some money as well, but it is something to behold. So the Summer League experience continues to get better. Like I said, I'm not BSing y'all. It really has become a mini All-Star in terms of the amount of events that are coming on and being taken place out there. So
hey, man, I just want him to do a drop, Money in the Bank. So when we do our free agency for next year, we got a drop. I got money in the bank.
That's a vibe. Again, shout out GI. So, but final programming note here for us here. It's the summertime, as we've alluded to. So the Baseline will be going to more of a bi-weekly or as news happens segment. But stay tapped into what's on all of our channels. Obviously, if the Dame and James Harden situation happen tomorrow, we'll be recording to kind of get that news out there as well too. But make sure you understand what the schedule is. We're not going anywhere. We're going to take a little bit of summer reprieve though for ourselves as well.
Yeah, every now and again. I mean, we all have to do that at some point, right?
Yes, sir.
They could just slide me a little bit of money in the bank. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, man, we appreciate everybody for hopping on board with us this week for the Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. Hey, have a great 4th of July week ahead. Keep it locked, man. As always, man, we want everybody to feel safe and happy, but keep us locked and keep us tuned in. We appreciate you guys. Catch up with you next time.